Hello and welcome to this two-part segment in our multimedia environmental series. For those of you who've been following us, in the last 3 months we've covered a lot of ground. We discovered that we are among the most polluted small island states in the world. We discovered that our drainage system is over 40 years old and desperately needs revamping. We discovered that in the absence of recycling laws, we dump over 50 million plastic bottles every month. When these are exposed to heat, they produce among the most toxic substances that exist. We discovered that there have been calls to shut down 2 of our 5 dumps because they are filled to capacity, unhygienic, and spread disease. We discovered that a tiny country like Barbados is recycling up to 70% of its waste, while we recycle next to nothing. We discovered that there's been no new environmental legislation for a decade, that the beverage bill is gathering dust. So far, the new PP government has been making all the right noises. We're prepared to be patient, but we're also anxious for action. You have been sending us letters and posting on our Facebook pages asking for change. Today, we ask not just where did we go wrong, but why did we go wrong? With guests Senator Penelope Beckles, former Minister of the Environment, and Dr. Joth Singh of the EMA. And for part 2, that is next week, with the same guests, we will look for solutions. Senator Beckles and Dr. Singh, welcome to the show. But first, here's a quick montage of what we've been seeing these past few weeks. Dr. Singh, on a scale of 1 to 10, with 1 being the best scenario, where does Trinidad and Tobago stand today in terms of protecting its environment?
Well, 1 being the best,
Yes.
I would say we probably maybe at about a 7 or 8. I think we are significantly behind, and I think it has a lot to do with the multitude of problems and issues that we deal with in Trinidad and Tobago. And I think very different to the rest of the Caribbean islands, because of our industrialized nature. So it's a complicated issue. I think we have made significant headway in certainly with the setup of the Environmental Management Authority and the legislation which supports it. I think Trinidad is probably ahead as far as the legislative framework goes. Okay. But certainly in the context of response, I think we are behind.
Senator Beckles, your party was in government for the previous 8 years, and you did some good work. There were several ideas, legislation was drafted, but we saw no real action for the environment. We saw that the government could take action in areas such as smelters, quick action on huge buildings and on summits. Do politicians just not care about the environment?
Well, I don't agree that no action was taken. First of all, the Environmental Management Authority was first of all set up by the PNM some years ago. I'll probably just quickly run through some of the areas that I would say we were successful in. For example, the water pollution rules, that was actually laid in Parliament, and that is now law. We completed the drafting of the air pollution rules. I know that when I left in 2007, there was still some concerns, and there was another round of consultation, but that was completed. There are a number of other actions. For example, we have done an inventory on hazardous waste, looking at about more than 300 companies, and that would allow the EMA now to draft the hazardous rules. I can't say exactly where that is, but I know that is in the system. One of the successes for me would be the declaration of 5 areas as environmentally sensitive. That is never done before in Trinidad and Tobago. We're talking about Matura, River, the Aripo savannas, the Mainridge in Tobago, and Bucca Reef. As I recall, I think the EMA has actually declared 3, which is the Aripo savannas, Matura, and the River. The complexity, of course, in doing Bucca Reef and Mainridge, I know that that is on the system, but you actually have to do the mapping, you have to do the surveying, and I think that is one, for me, a great achievement. 2 areas were also declared Ramsar sites. That is River and Bucca Reef. Initially, there was just one. River, Caroni and Bucca Reef, and Trinidad, for a small country, to have 3 Ramsar sites, 3 wetlands, that has put us on the map. Of course, there are several others, but that's just my initial. I know that the major concern, as you talked about the flooding and you talked about the drainage and the recycling, which is very visible, and that therefore gives the impression that nothing has been done. But I think as we talk a little more, I'll give some other areas that I think have been successes. But to start, I think that's at least a good start.
Dr. Singh, since the inception of the EMA Act in 2000, it was really set up as a body that would get to grips with our environment and set and enforce rules. We don't really see that happening. What we actually saw was a High Court ruling that the EMA's certificate of environmental clearance for the proposed smelter was actually illegal. Now, how can the EMA rebuild its reputation? You do come across a little bit like a body that basically does what the government tells you to do.
Well, I would disagree with that. And certainly, since I have joined the EMA, which is now just about 2 years, the organization has been utilizing its legislation to act in an appropriate fashion. I think sometimes the EMA is expected to respond in areas outside of its jurisdiction. And therefore, there is this perception that the EMA, what is the EMA doing? But I think it's important to note that there are several agencies set up in Trinidad to respond to a variety of issues. And the EMA, which is operating under the Environmental Management Act and the subsidiary legislation, is indeed taking on that responsibility in a very serious fashion. The issue with the Alotrin smelter, as you know, the EMA challenged that decision because we disagreed with the ruling. We felt that the learned judge erred in her judgment. And we are still awaiting the ruling of the Court of Appeal on that particular issue. And we're uncertain now whether a ruling will come at all in the context of the current administration making a decision to not continue with Alotrin.
I'm sorry to interrupt, but do you think it was a good idea?
The smelter?
Yes.
Well, when I look back at the information that exists and trying to be as objective as possible, the indications were from an environmental perspective that it was a well thought out project and that indeed the environmental implications would have been taken care of. They would have been mitigated because the EMA took more than 2 years, almost 3 years before they made a decision on that issue. Looking at all the information and even going beyond what was required, I would think, in terms of issues related to modeling of that area. And the evidence that I have reviewed, and certainly, I was not in the guts of it at that time. I was not at the EMA. What I have looked at suggests that the technology which was to be utilized at Alotrin, which is probably the best technology available, would not damage the environment and human health to any level which would have been unacceptable.